got to be laid back when you talk about this subject. I wanted to announce that Wellness Way, this is a extract made by yours truly. It is a brand new extract. We got this and we're getting it on the market as quickly as possible because of the new evidence that is coming forth that manipulating the microbiome with fecal transplant has beneficial effects on multiple different diseases, including autism spectrum disorders. How many of you thought I was serious there? Give me a like or whatever. How many of you think I was actually serious? Well, I'm serious about the research. The research doesn't stink, you know, haha, pun intended. It's actually pretty darn good research. But no, we don't have a feces extract or liquid poo on the Wellness Way website that you can go and get. That would be kind of disgusting. But legitimately, it's not liquid. It's encapsulated feces from a healthy donor that has been used in treatment of disorders. Severe bowel disorders, diarrhea, Clostridium difficile infections of the bowels that can be actually deadly, causing severe dehydration through diarrhea, and being antibiotic resistant, something that is more effective than any antibiotic drug out there was literally transplanting like the spouse's feces, and you take a capsule of it. Kind of crazy stuff, but it just goes to show you, like the research studies that we're going to kind of discuss today really just go to show you the beneficial effects of having a very diverse, and that's probably the key term I want you to take away from this, is having a significant diversity. Now, the diversity of our microbiome really goes all the way back to, to mother's health and mother's environment when she gave birth to you, the procedures, the antibiotics put in the eyes, whether they were or weren't, the antibiotics used in the hospital, the microflora in the hospital, some pretty cool studies. So mothers just, I know that all mothers may not be able to do this, be willing to do this, desire to do this, that type of thing, but I can't encourage you enough to have a home birth. Safely with a midwife if you've never had a home birth before. But I have multiple patients that actually have done. We did 2 home births. We did 1 hospital birth, just long story that I'm not going to get into today. That was very traumatic for both me and my wife with our son Amos. But the reality is home births, and we see this in our children. We see this in their temperaments. We see this in their health, their ability to fight off things like, gosh dang it, I'm blanking. See, I need more microbiota in my gut, I guess, so my brain can actually remember. But I remember it. Some viral infections that my daughter and my son have fought off. But again, looking at the chickenpox virus when they got that, and even whooping cough exposure, my daughter Magnolia fighting them off much more efficiently than my son Amos. And the differences there were Amos was born in a hospital via C-section, and Magnolia was born at home. They've studied home birth, the microbiota. They've studied the health of infants breastfed and born in a hospital, not born in a hospital, and the microbiota. Even though a mother may breastfeed in a hospital, their children may, and be a vaginal birth, their children may be actually inoculated, basically colonized by the environmental bacteria within the hospital, which can mean they can be inoculated or basically take on the microbiota of the hospital, which can oftentimes be pathogenic or infectious bacteria, or bacteria that would be harmful if overgrown and not beneficial and could be negative to their physiology, their neurology, and their health. So I can't encourage you enough to, yes, breastfeed, stay off the antibiotics, get rid of them. If you don't have an infection, the eye goop is completely unnecessary. One does not need to put antibiotics in a child's eyes unless the mother has an active infection. And even then, I would prefer to say, hey, the fact that breastfeeding, breast milk, has more antimicrobial properties than the antibiotics they give the children. Just ladies, breastfeed a little bit. Sorry to be kind of blunt here and straightforward, but express some milk right in the eyes of your children and infants, and you don't need the antibiotic in the eyes. Hey, what in the world? Science says breast milk is better than antibiotics. Why not just squirt some breast milk in the child's eyes rather than destroying their microbiota and microflora of their entire body sometimes, since it's going to be soaked into their bloodstream? Just a thought, just throwing that out there. Anyways, but nice little study if you want to do a little reading in your leisurely time. Maybe, have this sitting next to the commode and you can read about fecal transplant as you're doing a fecal deposit. But you can get the links to the research and the articles. You can tell I'm in a unique mood today. What do you expect when you're talking about poop? It's just like, it makes you smile and laugh. So, but manipulating the human microbiome to manage disease, even cognitive diseases as well as infectious diseases. So highly, highly recommend. They talk a lot about IBD, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, those types of things, in which the microflora, the bacteria that colonize your digestive tract and even your whole entire body, your skin, your eyes, your ears, everywhere. All right, you need good bacteria. You need bacteria, you need a large diversity. And the larger the diversity, the healthier the individual is oftentimes going to be. So that being said, you have to get out in nature and you have to get out in the world, and you can't be sanitizing everything around your children. Sanitizing brings about the effect of increasing colonization and exposure to antibiotic-resistant and bad bacteria. So highly, highly recommend using non-sanitizing, non-antibiotic type soaps and cleaners and sprays and things like that. Having a pet actually has been shown to lower the risk of allergies and asthma and different illnesses like that if they have a pet while the child is very young and their immune system is developing, and the child is, and through that process of having an animal, the animals go in and out, they track things in on their feet, and on their hair and their coats, and they don't shower every day, so they actually slough off a lot of microbial diversity into the atmosphere. You breathe that in, you ingest that, and it goes into your sinus cavities and other things. So, and I did mention about my son, Amos, being born in a hospital. One of the things we did with my wife afterwards is we had her eat fermented foods, take probiotics, just really worked on rebuilding her gut, ate soil-based foods or soil-grown foods in healthy soils. That's one of the best ways. I highly recommend people have your own garden, mulch it, don't till it because you destroy the fungus. So your mushrooms, mycelia, you destroy that every single year you till. And if you don't have plant plant matter, woody mulch, leaf litter, grass clippings, those types of things that bacteria and funguses and worms can grow on and consume, then you're not going to produce certain types of carbon molecules that are necessary to keep the tight junctions of our digestive tract sealed and healthy. So what we did with my son was, sometimes people would be like, that's disgusting, but yet, you know what? I want to do my best I possibly can to get my son. Yes, we breastfed and everything like that, but we did a vaginal swab and went through the nasal passages, swabbed it into the nasal passages and in the mouth. So by doing that, we're helping to culture the microflora that was within the vaginal tract that Amos did not get to go down through. So I see Leslie on, Steph, Kylie, appreciate it. Becky, appreciate everybody being on. Looking forward to the discussion. If you have any questions, please ask away. I know they've been kind of preaching and teaching here, but here we go. Link, Ashley, when is the seminar? The online. So the 21st of January, we're going to be doing at 5 p.m. Tuesday, the 21st of January, will be an online by invitation basically only, not that we have to invite you, but you have to sign up for this webinar, so it would be more personalized. It's webinar exclusive, what Ashley says. So we're doing that 5 p.m. the 21st of January, so you have to get signed up for that, and I guarantee Ashley will tag it, so you should be able to find it in the comments here on Facebook Live. Or you can call our office 931-591-2010 if you're having difficulty finding the link to be able to sign up for that. So, link to gut bacteria between gut bacteria and your child's behavior. So we're going to go through two cases that I have, a child dealing with and on the autism spectrum disorders, dealing with autism, brain injury, and then another child dealing with ADHD. So we're going to be talking about both those and what we've been able to discover and find and begin to work on with their GI and their digestive tracts. So this is the biggest paper. This is kind of the main one that I was going to kind of point out to everybody, the scientific reports, the long-term benefits of microbiota transfer therapy. MTT is what it's abbreviated as for autism symptoms and gut microbiota. So they saw improvements in both the GI symptoms, and roughly they say 50%. You can find higher rates of that or correlation between gut and GI problems. With autism spectrum disorders and neurocognitive problems and even depression and Alzheimer's disease and MS and tons of stuff. But so it'd be unique if this was to benefit individuals dealing with MS and other neurological problems. But also they've shown in animal studies, which is really cool to kind of confirm this, is through beneficial bacterial culturing, so just taking probiotics in animal studies, they use maternal immune activation, activating the maternal immune system, and by doing so, and they do that through injection, mind you, through injection, not natural infection, they do it through injection via, basically, in my opinion, if you're injecting something to activate the immune system, that's exactly the purpose of vaccination. So they know through activating the immune system through a injection vaccination, the purpose of vaccines is to activate the immune system, and no wonder the CDC funded a study and found that if mothers receive the influenza vaccine during the first trimester, there's a substantial increased risk of autism in their offspring they were pregnant with at that time. That's a maternal immune activation. So, but they activated the immune system, it changed the microbiota, it changed the neural structure of these children, these mice or rat offspring, and then ultimately these mice were given probiotics and they actually improved cognitively fairly substantially. So that being said, that's a confirmatory study showing that, with this study just taking children who have autism or dealing with autism, taking those children and then doing a fecal transplant. So transplanting poop, that's literally what they did, all right? Obviously a healthy donor. Obviously donors that have more diversity and have the beneficial bacterial strains that so far have been associated with beneficial effects and beneficial states of health. They took those that feces from that individual, and these children took capsules. I don't think I put it in here, but it's something to kind of think about, and I'm going to kind of go over here and see if I can find it. So here we go. Go through kind of this simple protocol. So the microbial or the fecal transplant, all right, they kind of call it microbial transfer therapy. Sounds a little bit better than poo transplant.
Hold up on your full screen.
Full screen?
Yeah.
How do I do that with PDF, I wonder?
Or just make it bigger. Hit the green. Hit the green button. Yeah, that one. There you go.
There we go. So microbial transfer therapy consisting of 2 weeks of vancomycin, so they did an antibiotic treatment followed by bowel cleanse, then high dose fecal transplant, microbial transplant. Okay, and then they did 1 to 2 days and then a 7 to 8 weeks of daily maintenance dosages along with a stomach acid suppressant while taking these capsules. Why they take a stomach acid suppressant? I don't necessarily agree with this and want to do this, but I can understand the logic, and yes, at times you may want to. You could implement something like alkaline water. Alkaline water is not necessarily good to drink while eating, and I disagree really with it, I do, because you need the acid in your digestive tract to resist SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You also need that acid production there to break down your food. So if you're neutralizing the acid with alkaline water, well, then you're not going to digest your food as well. You may become deficient. And yes, in an acidic environment in our body, high acidic environment is not healthy, but that acid level needs to be there in the gut, shouldn't be there in your bloodstream, but the things that drive acidity in the bloodstream are going to be poor dietary habits. So change your dietary habits, not just take an antacid or take and drink alkaline water. But if I was going to say, hey, what if we can't get a culturing, we can't get and plant in the digestive tract of these children, we don't see that these microbiota that we desire to be there are getting there through a probiotic supplementation. What can we do? Well, we could say, hey, let's try and use alkaline water, suppressing the acid, allowing the capsule to get further down into the GI system, away from that acid so it doesn't get killed off. I had to correct one of my patients. This individual, we finally did a stool test because of some health issues. I sat down with him today and we were discussing his supplementation. He's like, I don't understand how I don't have good bacteria. I've been taking a probiotic daily for years now. One, the environment will dictate whether seeds can live. So your soil, the health of your soil, is more important than the seed itself. So you can put the bacteria in there with a probiotic, but that does not mean that you're going to grow that bacteria into a large culture. It's not going to grow into the population necessary for benefits of your health. You can keep putting seeds there, but again, throw seed on infertile soil and it's not going to grow. Like the biblical stories, you know what? You can throw seeds on stones and it's just going to spring up quickly and it's going to die off because it doesn't have the fuel there. It's going to be scorched by the sun. So, so we could use some biblical reference here to kind of talk about this. So one of the things I discovered, a couple things, was one, he'd been on antibiotics quite often. So that was problematic, but if the probiotic was working, then he doing a test months after an antibiotic should not have still had the effect. We should have been culturing by that point in time. So that said, he says, I usually put my probiotic into juice. And immediately I'm like, what kind of juice? And he's like, orange juice. And I'm like, so an orange juice fortified with vitamin C? He's like, I don't know. Concentrated orange juice. And I'm like, did you know that vitamin C, the acid, can actually kill bacteria? So basically, he was ruining his probiotic. But again, I'm sitting down saying, hey, let's work on the environment, get that soil healthy, and you're going to be able to grow that bacteria. And the reality is, in nature and being outdoors grows and improves microbial diversity. So get out in nature, pull some carrots straight from the ground in mulch soil, that's what I was getting at earlier, and consume those just by dusting them off a little bit, getting the major dirt clods and your rocks and stuff that don't grind your teeth, and eat the carrot. I do that on a constant basis. My kids love to pull wild garlic from the ground because it's one of the easiest things for them to identify here in Tennessee, and they eat those. I literally just pull the roots off so that the mud's just not a big old clump of mud. I hand it to them and they eat wild garlic. So I highly recommend grazing, a type of grazing that will increase microbial diversity. So Marie Clement says they're not allowing families to do the vaginal seeding here for post C-section in New York City unless they are part of a limited study. They would have to join in advance of delivery and most likely be a scheduled C-section. Makes me nuts. No research on vaccines and pregnancy, but giving the baby its mother's secretions is a risk. Yeah. So what the baby would naturally be exposed to, you can't do unless you're, so what we did would have been, I guess, not allowed medically. You can do whatever you want at home, all right? So I would say, parents, your children are yours. God gave you them to protect and take care of, all right? Who cares about any law in any state that says you can't do something that we know is healthy for those children? But I'm going to say that please, women, if you have some sort of STD, sexually transmitted disease, then you might not want to. If you have a bacterial infection, you need to be healthy to be able to promote healthy microbial balance in your children. So work on your health first, all right? So I got to throw that in there, I guess, as a clause. But there are, and Marie Clements, there is research, and it's actually quite frightening, the research. And I did some breakdowns, and we got videos on the wilddoc.com. I did some breakdown of the CDC cited studies that show harm, but yet they just brush it aside, showing huge increases in fetal loss. VAERS reports, Vaccine Evidence Reporting System, CDC published studies that show increases in autism in children born to mothers who received the flu vaccine during the first trimester, and then also studies. I actually here recently went over the only, from what I can find and what they report and admit in these research studies, the only 2 placebo-controlled trials on safety. And one of them found the possibility of a 152% increase in fetal loss. And then the other one found more children at the age of 6 months had died to the mothers, if they were born to the mothers who received the influenza vaccine over a true saline placebo. And these studies were done in Africa and funded by the Gates Foundation. That being said, it seems like the best quality evidence shows we should not be vaccinating mothers. And again, it goes back to that is a form of immune activation, which in animal studies is used purposefully to cause autism-like symptoms. And again, rats, I use autism-like symptoms because, it's going to be slightly different, but they cause autism in rats via injection and immune activation. Granted, they're not using a vaccine that we inject in children, but they're using an injection and not allowing for natural infection, which when they studied vaccination versus natural infection, they see higher amounts of inflammation being driven post-vaccination during exposure to the same virus they were vaccinated against, thus higher immune activation after the vaccine. And that was a study done in 2014. So just clarifying on that, and giving people the know-how to be able to understand that there is research out there showing great harm by vaccination without benefit in pregnant women. I was told that fecal transplants are illegal for those under 18, but I believe this will help my ASD son. Options. So Gina, options are, let me kind of jump ahead here just for a second, since Gina has a question that is kind of answered here. So I can go back. There were several different bacterial strains. And sorry about this, folks, but we got a question. I want to answer it to the best of my ability here. Where's my PDF at? There it is. Okay. So the bacterial strains in this study, the 2 that they felt were most beneficial or they suspected to be the most beneficial are including significant increase in bacterial diversity and relative abundances of Bifidobacteria, and there are multiple strains, and Prevotella bacterial strains. So that said, I go over here, and I could actually show you that the Bifidobacteria in this child, so this is the child dealing with ASD, all right? So he has high levels of the Prevotella species, and he actually had higher, I wouldn't say extreme high, he had the normal ranges. It was up in the 3rd to 4th quartile. It's actually got cut off with this screenshot. But he had both types of bacteria within what would be considered normal ranges or even higher ranges in overgrowth of these things. So that being said, these types of bacteria, you need to do stool testing to know whether a probiotic or bacteria is necessary, because the reality is if you have these bacteria which are used in the majority of probiotic supplements, if they have high levels or even overgrowth, if you have overgrowth, you could even be causing problems. So that being said, you need a microbial balance, not just point blank simply more bacteria going into the GI. You need bacterial diversity. You need a symbiotic relationship of these bacteria with your body and with each other. So that being said, testing shows we don't need to supplement with a probiotic really with this child. I'm going to be doing more nutritional things to help improve the diversity of his microbiota. So hopefully that answers that question, Gina. So testing is critical to know what you need to do and why you need to do it and whether you should be doing X, Y, or Z treatment strategies. So said I can't read that, it's too much, but emailed the CDC. Okay, so I want to go further into this because they're showing that the immune system, autoimmunity, GI problems are all connected to autism now, or at least in a vast majority of these children dealing with autism or individuals dealing with autism. So I want to go all the way back to what is claimed to be the only study ever published linking vaccines to autism, which is completely bogus. The CDC have published studies, and they have unpublished studies linking vaccines beyond the MMR vaccine, such as the hepatitis B vaccine. Go check out Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s page, Children's Health Defense, and you'll be able to get those unpublished documents that he was able to extract from the CDC because they didn't want to publish a huge increase. It was well over 10 times, tenfold increase in autism features and autism-like symptoms in autism in children given the hepatitis B vaccine at birth. And there are animal studies that show that the hepatitis B vaccine on day one in animals causes brain abnormalities, similar to autism. And yet they try and claim that vaccines don't cause autism because we're seeing brain structural abnormalities in children at around 6 months on MRI. So it couldn't be the MMR vaccine, but we're not saying it's just the MMR vaccine. We're saying improper immune activation via vaccination and injection that is not natural can cause it. And there are confirmatory studies on animals and unpublished documents from the CDC showing that humans, baby children, given the hepatitis B vaccine, have an increased risk of autism. Then we have a confirmatory study in animals showing the hepatitis B vaccine causes structural brain abnormalities and immune dysregulation in the brain. Okay, these are things that I did not link, but these are things that I'm just generally speaking about. But if you go, I think everything that I've talked about so far, you could find a study, PubMed, research article done by the scientists from around the world that are PubMed peer-reviewed, all right, legitimate science, you can find online. But let's talk about this here real quick. So this is supposedly the only study ever published linking vaccines to autism, and that Wakefield, and they had to retract it. So Lancet retracted the study. All right. Here are the results. This is where he stated what they found. We have identified chronic enterocolitis, that means inflammation of their colons, of their digestive tract, in children that may be related to neuropsychiatric dysfunction. All right. In most cases, onset of symptoms was after the measles, mumps, and rubella immunization. Further investigations are needed to examine this syndrome and its possible relation to this vaccine. Did he anywhere in this study say vaccines cause autism? Ironically, no, he didn't, but that's what the media, they needed a witch to hang and burn at the stake. That's what they needed, and that's what they did to Wakefield. Ironically, though, so they retracted that one. But yet, here is a Journal of American Medical Association from 2015 showing research misconduct, which is identified by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So all those FDA approved, or it's not FDA approved, so I'm not doing it, or it wouldn't be good for you, or it must not be effective if it's not FDA approved. That's a bunch of hocus pocus baloney. That's junk. It's ridiculous for somebody to say that because the science actually proves the opposite, that treatments are much more effective when not FDA approved, oftentimes. And on top of that, FDA approved drugs and procedures are oftentimes brought to market fraudulently. And even when the FDA knows it, they don't care to do anything about it. Listen to this. 57 published clinical trials were identified by the FDA inspection of the trial sites, and it found significant evidence of one or more of the problems. Some of these problems were false information. That's lying to people and lying to the FDA and regulators and drug approval processes. So 22 of those trials, that would be close to 40%, had false information, meaning they lied. And here's the reality. What I think is if the FDA went in looking to see if they could find problems, they found false information in roughly 40%. Most of the time, liars don't blatantly circle it and highlight it and put a big red pen saying, we are falsifying this data. Most of the time, liars try to hide their lies. So it's a whole lot more trials in research fraud going on than that right there. The problems of adverse reporting, so they didn't report harms coming to patients in 25%. Again, they'd probably lie about that too and try and hide it. Protocol violations, 42, that'd be 74%. That's a form of research fraud, and they oftentimes do that because they're not getting the results that they want to see. So they have to change their trial protocols to make it appear as if their drug or vaccine is effective. Inadequate and inaccurate record keeping, 35 trials, that'd be 61%. And this is just 57 published clinical trials that they evaluated in this one study. So all these problems, but listen to this. Only 3 of the 78 publications, so there's 57 trials, 78 publications. So somebody can do a trial study and do multiple publications, all right, on that one trial. So that's how you wind up with 78 publications. They said only 3 of those 78 publications that resulted in trials in which the FDA found them lying or not keeping proper records or harming patients and not telling people about it, or research fraud through protocol violations. You know, all this fraud, all these lies. Even one researcher committed murder and was found guilty of criminal negligent homicide, killing a patient of his because he lied about their liver and blood tests to make them look healthy enough to receive the chemotherapy so he could kill a patient. My presumption is that he wanted to cause harm in a group, so he lied on their blood work, he lied about their liver and kidney tests so that they would be put on a drug even though they should not be included in the study because of the risks to that patient, so that they could make this other chemotherapy drug look good. That's my presumption of why he did that. So they found out he committed murder and he killed somebody to commit research fraud, and guess what? They didn't do anything. There was, listen to this, violations, objectionable conditions or practices found during the inspection, no corrections, no retractions, no expressions of concern. Nothing was done. The FDA did nothing. Yet, a man even mentions, we should probably look into this. Parents are claiming vaccines may be associated with that autism. Maybe we should look further into it. Gets retracted. If you commit murder and fraud, the FDA knows about it and they don't force you to retract the studies. It's bogus. They retract what they want to point out as being wrong, but they won't point out true things that are being done fraudulently. Selective retraction. Don't like what the findings are and what the truth is, just retract the study. Find out a scientist is killing people for profits and making drugs look good, leave the study online so doctors think that chemotherapy is effective and the drug companies keep on making their profits. FDA doesn't really care about people. So, and that's scientific evidence there, folks. So, all right. So beyond that, what's crazy is the media will say that Wakefield's study right here, this retracted study, was supposed to be the only ever study claiming that vaccines may be associated or causing autism. Yet, in that study, he even cites other studies connecting vaccines to autism. Yes. In this study, again, if you do they do the TWD and they get the, so you do TWD in the comments on Facebook alone. You cannot do the TWD in the comments on YouTube or Instagram.
Instagram, you just click the link in your bio.
Okay, click the link in the bio on Instagram, I guess, and you get to the wilddoc.com, or do you actually go to the...
It sends them to your most current blog post.
There you go. Most current blog post is what you get in the bio on Instagram. So this is why I love Ashley and my staff, because I don't even need to know what's going on, and she tells me to tell you. All right, cool. So he mentioned this, cites this. Listen to this. 2 years prior to Wakefield saying vaccines, and parents are saying that vaccines might be associated with autism, here is a 2 years prior a study saying 15 of the TA patients developed symptoms within a week after immunization with the MMR vaccine. 3 had high fevers up to 106, convulsions within 1 day of the administration. In the 7 others, so listen to that, folks, 15 of these autistic children and patients, 15 of the would be then 7 and 15, now you've got 22. All right, I have to go back to confirm, but it's right there, 22, all right? So the vast majority of parents said the symptoms started after the MMR vaccine. All right, convulsions, and then in the other 7 autism patients, the symptoms gradually worsened severely, gradually rather than sudden loss of vocabulary with an onset of clinical abnormalities beginning around the 15 to 18 months of age. But 15 of the parents of these 22 children said it literally immediately happened after the MMR vaccine. So in that study, here's a unique thing though. They were using transfer factor, an immune signal molecule, to actually improve autism severity. It was slight improvement, but that should show us all the way back to 1996. We should have been looking into gut health, vaccinations, and looking into how can we balance and improve the immunity, the immune balance of these children with autism, and we may see improvements. And none of this has been mainstreamed yet, and that's what's sad. Food allergies even. This study was mentioned as well, I believe. And in this study, they found that actually removing things such as IgG, IgM, and IgA antigen antibodies that were active against casein, lactoalbumin, beta-lactoglobulin. So if you look at these things, they had immune system responses. So these would be considered food sensitivities, not necessarily allergies, but they are an immune response, and by definition, IgA immune responses are still a type of allergy, and they call it sensitivity. But you can do blood work and testing for these immune activators in our food, all right? And they could show a substantial improvement in these children by identifying things that would activate their immune system and cause inflammation within their body. So another way to bring down inflammation in the gut and heal their body. So now we're going to get into a couple cases. I do want to look over here at Facebook here real quick. And go to, so we have Taja. Taja says, I asked my son's GI doctor to do a microbiome check on my son when they did the last fecal calprotectin, and they said that a lot of times typos and stuff get me kind of AD, but I believe that's, and they said they had no way to test bacterial content. That just sounds crazy to me. How can't they? Well, they can. They just don't want to because anybody can do it. You could email, Taja, you can literally email me. You can go through thewilddoc.com, set up a consult. We can get you the kits, ship you the kits. You collect the bowel movements from your children over 2 to 3 days, and then you send it into the lab, and we sit down or we get on the phone and we talk about the results of that, and we work on how we can improve their digestive tract. Because it's not necessary, because again, so the findings of this child with suffering with autism, I always kind of trip up there. I'd rather say they're suffering with autism than they are autistic, not defined by that, all right? So, insufficiencies, fecal fats, fecal proteins were increased. Fats were increased, so insufficiencies, why would it say insufficiencies, but yet the findings were fecal fats and increased proteins? The reason it would be considered an insufficiency, this can be confusing for some patients as I walk them through these tests. It's not necessarily an insufficiency of what the finding and measurement is, the compound they're measuring, but it can actually be, so here's the study where the part of the chart where they see the increased proteins. So they're not breaking down, all right, appropriately. They're not digesting. Their digestive tract is not functioning appropriately, So this is one of the things why you see in certain trials and studies that using digestive enzymes with autistic or individuals dealing with autism, they show beneficial effects from that with their GI symptoms and sometimes their cognitive abilities. So with this individual, we need to improve protein digestion as well as fat digestion. Now, if we go back up, why would increased fecal fats mean it's coming out of the body? One, the child's nutrition is not eating a ton of healthy fats, for one, because I know the child's diet. The other factor is if they are not digesting and absorbing fats and it's coming out the other end and you see it in a stool sample, what that means is they may have a liver issue. They could be a poor diet, all right, and eating too many inflammatory fats, and then ultimately that would cause more brain inflammation. But if they have a liver and gallbladder issue, they may not digest or absorbing those fecal fats, those healthy essential fatty acids. And if you look at myelin buildup or the building blocks for myelin, the protective housing, protective coating around each and every one of your nerve fibers and around your brain, the necessary essential fatty acids for production of neurotransmitters. If you don't absorb healthy fats, your brain will not be healthy and it will not be protected and it will not be well insulated. Therefore, it can short circuit and ultimately lead to autism-like symptoms and behaviors and problems and inflammation around the brain. On top of that, it can decrease your capability of detoxifying and removing. So you need to work on the liver, you need to work on the gallbladder. One of the biggest things I see right now is that I'm seeing people utilize chelators when they've not done the foundational work of working on the digestive tract, which number one, simply put, it's the drain. And if they have increased fecal fats and their gallbladder, and that's an indication that their gallbladder is not functioning properly and putting out the right amount of bile or enough bile, they're not going to be detoxing no matter how much TRS, zeolite, or any other supplement they put in their body. It doesn't matter. Because if their filtering systems and their excretion systems are not excreting those things appropriately, and fecal fats can be an indicator of poor bile excretion, they're not going to detox. You've got to get the foundational pieces down. And the reality is, increasing bile flow, liver function, can ultimately lead to greater detoxification without any chelator at all. All right, our body's natural production of glutathione and other chelation agents and antioxidants, detoxifying compounds, is going to be increased, improved, and ultimately utilized properly if we take care of the gallbladder. So that's why fecal fats is an important indicator with these children. He also had yeast and fungal overgrowth, so he has something pathogenic. That would be an activator of the immune system. But ironically, despite an activation of his, or a pathogenic microbe in there, his immune system isn't responding, at least in his IgA immune system. So his gut barrier function is extremely poor. He can't keep pathogenic or harmful yeast overgrowth at bay. So short-chain fatty acids was another one, which it's good to have higher and have adequate amounts of short-chain fatty acids in the digestive tract. It's cooling, it's soothing, it's anti-inflammatory to the brain and to the digestive tract. And a lot of these short-chain fatty acids come from resistant starches. So like green bananas, eating things like cold potatoes and rice and different things like that, it's more of a bacterial food. It's your microbiota food. And then it's converted by the microbiota, the healthy bacteria and digestive tract, which you need to have the right bacteria to be able to produce these things. But if you're consuming those types of foods, then ultimately what it leads to is the microbiota, the bacteria, produce essential fatty acids from those starches. So you're feeding them and then you're eating what they poop out, basically. So we're talking a lot about poop today.
So Brittany on Instagram.
Instagram question, okay?
Saying, how do you fix this? I'm assuming she means your gut health, I'm assuming?
So how do you fix, so Brittany's asking, how do you fix this? It's kind of general simple questions. So with him, we're going to be working on stimulating more pancreatic enzyme function. We're going to supplement temporarily with enzymes to help improve digestion. And we're going to start using herbs that are going to stimulate bile flow. So we're going to take care of the majority of the aspects. We're not going to do a probiotic. We're going to work on building his mucosal membrane immune system, and over the time using medicinal mushrooms or using things like dirt water, ion biome, many people know it as restore, those types of things. We're going to use those to build up the tight junctions of his digestive tract, though his indicators for true severe leaky gut are not high. His immune system is very weak, and we see that, again, ion biome or restore, things like chamomile or even marshmallow root, it's more severe in digestive tract inflammation, but he didn't have tons of inflammatory markers there. In essence, his immune system is weak. We need to build his immune system up is what we need to do. So we're going to do some preliminary things, and then we're going to start doing herbs and supplements that improve the strength of the...
Like my life. I'm going to email.
Cool.
You.
We can help. So yeah, if you want a consultation or you want to do these types of testing, go through the wilddoc.com online schedule or request a consultation, or you can also call 931-591-2010. You can message us through Facebook. Some things get lost as we get a ton of responses from these videos, and sometimes it takes me a month or more to get back to people, and sometimes I don't even get back to everybody. So here's another child, okay? These are neurocognitive behavioral disorders. This is an ADHD example, but you look at this across the board, they had far more problems. So what I would say is the gut is not the sole cause of autism, but it can be a major contributing factor. And also, if the gut is unhealthy, it increases the risk of poor detoxification, poor assimilation, poor absorption of essential nutrients and fatty acids and things that are needed for brain development and neutralization of environmental toxins and other things like that. So now that I said environmental toxins, my brain went back to the fact that the original study I was talking about, the fecal transplantation being used and seeing significant improvements even at 2 years. So they went through the study for 18 weeks. And then 2 years after the study's completion, they went back to the families of these children. It was like 80% improvement. Even after 2 years, I believe it was 58%, if I remember the percentages correctly from the study, still showed that their GI symptoms and their cognitive ability slowly improved. And this is the reality of what you're going to see, parents, mothers, fathers, and many people can vouch for this. You will see over time improvements. You're not going to see like a drug that suppresses a symptom. Not always is it going to be immediate, okay? One of the things I've seen massive immediate responses with are things like CBD, helping to calm the inflammation of the nervous system, and chiropractic care. I've seen improvements in bowel movements. I've seen children go from nonverbal to verbal within a couple weeks of adjusting because it reduces a neurological stress. And if they have that potential there, but they're under stress, most human beings, if they're under stress, they get tongue-tied and they can't speak. They can't get the words out appropriately. They get antisocial when they're under stress. So if the spine is causing inflammation neurologically, or if the spine is just causing a stress response, you have a suppression of normal neurological and cognitive behavior, and you see some improvements almost instantaneous with chiropractic care. And a lot of times you'll see it, boom, it jumps up, there are improvements here, and then it plateaus. And then you got to work on these other aspects. And then what you see over time is you create the environment for the child to be able to nourish themselves, and then that's the environment they need and are capable of healing, and then they start healing and developing, and that takes time. Thus, it was a 2-year process and their cognitive behaviors improved. That one study on immunotherapy, I believe there was I forget the number, but one of the studies that I mentioned here today in this talk showed that many of the children going through immunotherapy were able to improve to the point where they could enter into for the first time normal school. So this child had multiple infections, 2 actual parasites. EPX is a measurement of bowel inflammation, so he had increased inflammation. Fecal secretory IgA, this child's immune system was actually being activated and going after the infections, unlike the child before, which was basically their immune system was in a deficit. Fecal fats were off the chart, way high, and then also having pathogenic fungi or a yeast overgrowth. So nutritionally, working on the yeast, changing the diet. On top of that, proper acid production typically takes care of yeast. I see a lot of people that won't be able to get rid of yeast going to functional medicine doctors and doing different things like doing hardcore candida diets. And yet, if we were to just give them supplementation or start ingesting bitter herbs through dietary means or supplementation, such as Oregon grape, you often start to produce the necessary acid to kill off the yeast and keep it at bay. So you want to create a homeostasis, you want to create balance, and you want to create health and proper function of the GI. And then, because I can test people that eat horrible diets and very high starch and breads and grains, it'd be like the opposite of the candida diet, and they don't have yeast overgrowth. And then I can test somebody else who eats fairly healthy. So then we know that it's not just, hey, we need to do a candida diet. Not all the time. If somebody's diet is fairly decent and yet they have a yeast overgrowth, that tells me as a clinician, and this is one of the biggest things with Wellness Way. The Wellness Way doctors all over the US, and even I think we got one in like Ireland or somewhere. Sorry for not knowing for sure. But, so if you needed a chiropractic locally, search the Wellness Way clinics, all right? So, one of the cool things is you don't just look at these lab tests and say, oh, he has a bunch of fats coming out his rear end, so we need to decrease fats. I've literally seen people be recommended that. Oh, he has lots of fats in his stool, please stay away from fats. And I'm like, likely it's an absorption, and if you look at the diet, and the diet's not massive saturated trans fats and junk that causes inflammation and cause poor ingestion or absorption, well then if it's not that, then it's poor function of his digestive tract. Maybe it's a pathogen. Maybe again we have that confirmed here, or maybe again it's a liver problem and poor secretion of bile. So we need to work on those things and understand what does the lab tell us in conjunction with what the person and how the person is living, what they're eating, what they're doing, those types of things. So just know that, because that's one of the struggles I see a lot of people go through is with yeast, candida diets and things like that, and not getting the improvements they want to see. So again, just the lab markers here, looking at those things. Again, the fecal secretory IgA, high everything on fecal fats, and those are the findings. So, and the reality is, again, the reason I showed that was because moms, dads, please realize that the risks of the drugs used to treat ADHD far outweigh the benefits. I would rather have a live child than a child that's getting straight A's in school. They will never, if they commit suicide or they do something horrible to themselves, ADHD medications are shown, or the condition itself, they're not sure, but long-term studies of children who simply take ADHD medications, these stimulants, have decreased cognitive function and brain size over the long term, all right? So it's not true healing going about it from a drug model. So again, the gut bacteria can have an effect on your child's behavior. But not only that, maybe it's not the bacteria, maybe it's the parasite, maybe it's the yeast. So fix those things. So going back to questions here on Facebook again. Most treatments that work with ASD, that work with my son are not FDA approved, such as HBOT treatments. Here's one of my 2020 goals, folks. I'm going to be investing in HBOT therapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. That's one of my goals, to go through training for that and start to utilize that, because yes, I feel that the improvements in blood circulation and oxygen transport into tissues necessary to heal. And I even have a guy who actually works with hospitals as a patient of mine. what he told me when I ran that by him, I was like, reason it came up in discussion because we were talking about stroke. And I was like, hey, you need to look into HBOT therapy. And he's like, really? Where'd you hear about HBOT? And I started telling him. And he's like, yeah. He was in the Navy, I guess, or worked with Navy SEALs and training. And guess what? He's like, we used to use it all the time. And if we had diabetes, if we had people with different cuts and lacerations and all these things, they would use HBOT for rapid healing. And that's the concept with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, is that it improves transport of oxygen because it compresses those molecules and improves the amount of oxygen capable of being transported in the blood to tissues such as the brain. It enhances the healing capabilities in those tissues, and they can heal more rapidly. Linda Walton says, you're speaking the truth. Appreciate that, Linda. Thanks for all the encouragement. Everybody who shouts out encouragement to us. Reading this. Go ahead with the Instagram then.
Can you tell us more about auto-brewery syndrome?
Auto-brewery syndrome. Auto-brewery syndrome. Terminology I may not be familiar with, so I may have to look it up. Auto-brewery. Auto-brewery syndrome is a rare medical condition in which intoxicating quantities of ethanol are produced through endogenous fermentation. Oh, yeah. I don't know why I didn't know the name. Auto brewery, because I'm like, auto, okay, automatically. Brewery, I'm like, brewery. Beer, wine, liquor, whatever. Alcohol. So that is through fermentation. Certain types of bacteria and overgrowth are there present in the GI system, and ultimately you're basically fermenting to such a rapid degree starches and grains and things like that, or any of your food. You can make potato vodka, you can make cucumber vodka. So it's not necessarily just starches that need to be eliminated. You need to change the microbiota. I would bet fecal transplant would work with it, although that is not a viable option that people can get their hands on. So it would be, I would want to do stool testing and look at what we need to do to start improving GI health. So that's where you'd want to start. Taja, thank you, Dale. Thank you so much. Dr. Dale, you are a hero. Well, I appreciate that. I like reading that stuff. I do appreciate that. Sorry for the typos, LOL, son to sleep 17 times for more than 25 exploratory surgical procedures and removed 250 biopsies by the time he was 8, and he's still undiagnosed with severe GI inflammation. Taja, I would love to. If you would pay for the lab, and I see the lab in the GI sample we get, and the lab shows nothing really that I feel that I can improve or help upon, you have no charge. You would have to pay the lab. There's no upcharge or anything for the lab. You would pay for consulting. But if I feel we can help, we can sit down and talk about that. And a lot of times what I see is they don't do the proper testing.
Here's one. This is Facebook, Chelsea. Would age make a difference in the effectiveness of these treatments? I'm an autistic adult and wonder if it's too late to reverse my autism.
Neuroplasticity is always capable. So someone is saying that they are on the spectrum, an adult on the spectrum, asking you if it's too late. It's never too late. You always have the capability. I've seen Alzheimer's reverse, dementia reverse. So the reality of these these brain injuries, they can always improve. During developmental stages, because the body's physiology is naturally going to promote cognitive development, neuroplasticity, increased neuron cell growth, those types of things, it would be more beneficial. But there is also a way to possibly enhance that, HBOT therapy. You could look at medicinal mushrooms. Certain mushrooms increased nerve regrowth factor. So that's what I would be combining. And trust me, my brains are working when I get HBOT. It's going to be off the hook. I can't wait to see the improvements, because just the number of testimonies that I've seen, I've read about, I've heard about, people that I've worked with and they incorporate that or they incorporated it already. But the incorporation of the other medicinal herbs, working the liver a little bit more in depth, I mean, the combination is truly, truly key. But to see something like that, I would want to incorporate different things like medicinal mushrooms that would enhance nerve regrowth factor, enhancing the potential for reassimilation of normal neurocognitive connections there. So that's what I would say. It's never too late. You can always improve with your health. Now, I tell parents every time, in anybody I work with really, I tell them, we can do the right things for you, or what we know to be right or needed, all right, through testing, evaluation, discussion. We can do good things for you. You're gonna have a healthier child. Do you want a child that's healthy with autism or an unhealthy child with autism? Most parents are gonna select a healthy child with autism. So the things we're doing aren't harmful. They're not gonna hurt the child. And that's what's amazing about non-drugged therapies. You can improve the health of your child. God is the only one who knows how much improvement's going to be seen in this lifetime, all right? So yes, you can always do good things for your body, your physiology, your neurology, if you know what to do, why to do it, how to do it, and you walk that path. You will be healthier. You can get stronger. You can get better. So that's what I have to say in that situation. On the stool test, Lee says, on the stool test, what is the difference between an infection and a bad bacteria overgrowth? So in essence, a lot of these labs will do an evaluation and analysis and look at individuals with these. Most of us have some type of pathogenic bacteria in our gut that would be considered pathogenic or an infection when it grows too much. So we have E. coli. We have these things that we're exposed to, infected with, on our skin, in our bodies, whatever, but it can't grow out of control. So therefore, it's not a true infection until it grows to a certain point where it can cause harm. So the difference between having the bacteria, bad bacteria in there, and having an overgrowth, which would then be considered basically an infection. And a lot of times they don't even consider it an infection until you have substantial symptoms from that. And a lot of times the symptoms can be wide-ranging, from neurocognitive problems to an upset stomach and inflammation and bowel disorders such as IBS or IBD. So thanks for that question, Leah. Or Lee, maybe, L-E-A. Chelsea, what age make a difference in the effectiveness of these treatments? Yep, you already read that one. Thank you, Ashley. We answered that one. So Stacy, I am loving all this information. Thank you so much for the dedication to the proper health and healing. Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate everybody's encouragement, but it looks like that's all the questions. We hit all the questions on Instagram, Ashley?
Yes, it cut off at an hour.
Oh, it cut off at 1 hour?
She put it back in for me. I asked her because I wasn't able to read it.
Gotcha.
Received an MMR vaccine with work.
Received an MMR.
Liver levels were so bad, it hurt my abdomen. Oh, it hurt. My abdomen is so bloated, I can't fit most of my clothes. Chronic 2 years. Is this something you can help?
Yes. So let me read that. Okay. So this is somebody watching online currently, and I'm just going to hold the name. Obviously, she commented. She received the MMR vaccine with work. Since my liver levels were so bad, it hurt. My abdomen is so bloated, I can't fit in most of my clothes. Chronic 2 years. Is this something you can help? Yes, 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 yes. There are so many things that I'm already saying we need to start supplementing and getting you on. I would need to know, was your liver already damaged and you had problems, which obviously would have set you up for an increased risk of the MMR vaccine causing you harm. You could also have a chronic infection in your digestive tract, because these are live virus vaccines and they have done biopsy and found live viruses, the measles vaccine strain virus in the tissues of the digestive tract of children on the spectrum who are dealing with severe digestive or GI problems. So that being said, yes, you could be chronically infected by a measles vaccine with a live virus vaccine. So it's good liver prior to. Okay, so damage could be adjuvants and different things like that. There probably was. And the reality is you can have about they estimate 40% function of your liver can be lost. So literally like cirrhosis of your liver up to 60% before you have lab tests showing problems. So that being said, sometimes it's what pushes you over the edge. So we're ultimately going to need to rebuild and improve the liver function and ultimately reduce the inflammation in the digestive tract. More than likely we're dealing with I would theorize an infection. Granted, the labs that we can work with right now, we can't necessarily test it and biopsy tissue within the GI, and most hospitals don't want to do that because then they would start to admit through that testing that yes, you have the vaccine strain of the measles virus in your GI tissues, and yes, you have IBD now, inflammatory bowel disorders. So yep, we just caused a problem with you via vaccination. They wouldn't want to do that, so that's the problem with getting that type of testing done. So
if anyone on Instagram wants to set up a consult with you, they just need to DM you on Instagram, and then I will get them the direct message.
Direct message.
They know what it means.
DM.
Just DM. I would like to set up a consult with Dr. Dale.
Cool.
And then I'll take care of the rest.
All right. So if you direct message us, Ashley, through Instagram, you DM us. I just learned that abbreviation. Yeah. I know what microbial transplant therapy, MTT, means. Anybody else? Just MTT me. Kind of DM me. MTT, microbial transfer therapy, fecal transplant, just MTT me.
Yeah, DM's better.
Yeah, just direct message me. Don't MTT me right now. I don't know if it would be featured. I don't know. Okay, so if you direct message us, if you DM us through Instagram, if you're on Instagram rather than Facebook, you can get in contact with us. Ashley can set you up with consultation and testing if you so wish. We always do initial consultation, interview, that type of things to know what testing is appropriate for each individual. So, but there are ways to heal. That's what this comes down to. Your gut, the things that you have power over. And the reality is when I work individually with people, like I said from the beginning, there are a lot of things that I believe that you are not shackled to having to pay for and have to do things. The reality is a lot of the things are simple. Sometimes you just need to know that you need to do them, and sometimes you just need somebody to help guide you on that path so you know what does improve those things. Certain carbon molecules, that's why I love Ion Biome and Restore. These things, if you know you're not getting it through your food chain, if you're eating from a store, you're not getting it through your food chain. These carbon molecules are necessary for the binding and proper structure of your digestive tract, the health of your GI, the health of your immune system there. So if you do not have a healthy immune system in that area, you're going to increase your likelihood. You're going to be increased risk of developmental problems, of injury, of bowel disorders, of problems. So again, the easiest thing to me, maybe not the easiest thing because some people don't live on a farm and have multiple acres, or you know what, I'd say just do a little ecosystem in a big old pot in your house with in front of the window, set it outside for natural sun when it's warm enough, grow herbs, grow root vegetables, and pull it out of the soil. Put earthworms in there, put mycelia, inoculate it with mushrooms. You need bacteria, so you need it outside. It can't be sterile. And if you let it dry out too much, you have to really work on that environment. But that ecosystem is easy outside just using mulch chips, grass clippings, different things, leaves. Never leave soil bare. Once you've got it established, never till it. Do all you possibly can to never have to till. All right, I use clippings, I use leaves, I use mulch to cover my soil to shield basically from weed growth, and then little that soil turns black. That's carbon, and you're going to get a lot of the beneficial effects through that process of being able to consume. So really, God's given you everything you need. Sometimes you have to utilize people and the farmer that has extracted or harvested those things to give to you to help you in your process and path of healing. And other times, you know what? I try and do my best to teach my patients how they can do it on their own and sustain life on their own and live healthy. the way God intended them to. So I appreciate you all. I love you all. We're going to jump off here, and I say that, but yet I think we just got like 3 more questions in real quick. 2 more on Instagram. Let's keep answering questions for a few more minutes.
All right.
Let's go. I'm going to read one here. My daughter is 2 years old and has had C. diff for over a year now and sees an infectious disease doctor, and he keeps giving her the same medicine that doesn't help her at all. I don't know what else to do to help her. Any ideas? All right. So, number one, we might be able to help you, but again, I would definitely try and help you. We can do a stool test. We can start some supplements. We can start working with some herbs that can hopefully kill that stuff off and re-inoculate with good bacteria. And we can talk with you and work with you on a protocol, Makita, for that. But again, what is the most? So this 2019, December 26, 2019, this study, manipulating the human microbiome to manage disease. You're on Facebook, Makita. Please, TWD in the comments, get this link to this study, manipulating the human microbiome to manage disease. Take it to your doctor and ask him, why is he not? It is approved for C. diff to do microbial transplant, all right? So you can do this. You should have been doing this. This is the most effective with the least side effects and risks, this right here. So the medical community has not mainstreamed things that are more effective than their dang drugs. It's ridiculous. It's sad. People like her daughter suffering for 2 years, given antibiotics that could quite possibly and are definitely doing harm. It's sad that they won't even pay attention to their own research and evidence. All right, Liz, sorry about that, Makita, but that's the reality. I'm going to do all I can help you. I would say fire that doctor. If it's the only GI doctor you can get to, you take in that study and you say, why don't you do what is best and scientifically validated, the best thing for this condition? Why don't you get me to somebody who can do that for me? If you guys don't perform it, don't just simply keep giving us the dang drugs that the drug company is probably kicking back money to him to keep on prescribing instead of just saying, let's send you to a hospital that actually does microbial transplantation. All right. So, all right, Ashley, you go with Instagram.
Just curious, do you have any recommendations for herniated cervical disc?
Herniated cervical disc, yes, structural functional chiropractic care. So you find a great chiropractor that can do adjustments, that can definitely help, all right? If you can find somebody that does structural correction with exercise and rehabilitative positioning with molds, wedges, different things like that, that can absolutely help. I've also worked with patients, friends of mine from around the U.S. They send me their x-rays and I can get you set up with exercises to incorporate along with the proper chiropractic care. So cervical herniated disc, chiropractic care can quite possibly help you in healing that. Herniated discs are caused from misalignments or severe traumas. So if it's a severe trauma, still chiropractic can benefit, but likely the most likely cause is a structural positioning of your cervical spine that's caused chronic compression on that cervical disc, causing it to herniate. The majority of the time, we see that there's a loss of curvature, which if you all did this, you can feel it. Curvature in the cervical spine is what you should have. You absorb the forces of gravity through a spring-like, basically like a C-spring. It's the tensile strength of the muscles and the ligaments that give you that shock absorption. If you straighten your cervical spine or you reverse it, it's the #1 cause of herniated and cervical deteriorative disc disease. Guess what? You compress directly into those joints of your cervical spine. So working on that cervical curve is one of the most effective ways to improve a herniated disc through chiropractic care in conjunction with a type of physical therapy that most of the time chiropractors are familiar with if they do structural correction.
She was rear-ended.
Rear-ended car accident, so is a trauma. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, yeah, chiropractic care, I've helped many patients. So, Liz, how do you do? So, Facebook question, Liz, how do you go about figuring out how best to help your child with autism? PCP have offered nothing, have done stem cells and homeopath allopathic remedies, I guess, along with all traditional therapies. Some things missing, but not sure what. So, Liz, ultimately, I would need to just, if you're saying you've done everything, but you're not sure what's missing, then I would want to do a consult. And in that consult, you need to send me basically a list of every therapy, a timeline of your child, and basically a timeline of their story. What is their story? It's not like a written book, but what I want from you is I want to know from your pregnancy, so literally conception, environmental factors that you were surrounded by, any type of medication use, Tylenol use, infections, vaccinations, exposures, stress, your health at the time, any risk of in history of autoimmune diseases, those types of things. Like I need to know your story kind of during pregnancy and prior to. I need to know your child's birth process. I need to know everything so I can kind of start cluing in on what are the major contributing factors there. And then from there, going over what you've already done, what you've tried, what you've tested for, and what were the treatments for those tests. Because I've oftentimes see people, oh, I tested my gut and the doctor put me on a probiotic, and I look at their test results, they didn't need a probiotic. They needed better digestive processes and elimination, but they weren't addressed. They had indications of poor liver function. It was never addressed appropriately. So that being said, I just need to know what you've done, and we can go from there. I can't really answer that question live with what you've said. So,
My turn.
Yep, go ahead with Instagram.
My son has ASD and ADHD.
Okay.
They're not local. Are you able to offer treatment remotely?
Yes.
Or do you recommend I find a local practice?
So treatment remotely, yes, we can treat anything within the realm of not having to put my hands on your child in the way of adjustments. So everything else, every lab work, every supplementation, every nutritional recommendation, and everything I do, I can do over the phone and via email and via internet by sending you labs and getting you linked up with labs and blood work, stool samples, everything. We can take care of everything. So remotely. So awesome. Thanks for that question. Look forward to helping your child out. So Marcia, do you have recommendations for a good way for MTHFR to detox? So somebody with an MTHFR gene mutation, whether it's dual or a single mutation, the reality is what you need to realize is there are other genetic factors that can improve methylation, even if you had dual, even if you had both. The reality is your methylation may be set back, but the reality is you can still methylate, otherwise you'd be dead already. So that being said, you have to enhance natural methylation, glutathione production, those types of things, B vitamin production, and that takes gut health. That means reducing inflammation, and that also means increasing things in your diet that are necessary for proper methylation, glutathione, detoxification, those types of things. So you could improve liver function, bile excretion, all these things, which would naturally increase detoxification. Even if you weren't methylating that well, you're still going to be capable of improving detoxification in many other pathways and realms outside just that MTHFR. I think people get hung up on it, and I also believe that a lot of these genes aren't doing what we think they're doing, all right? I've seen a lot of people be vitamin deficient, B12 deficient. Yeah, oh, I have the MTHFR, but yet their gut's a mess. As soon as we heal their gut, their B vitamin, they're not deficient anymore, all right? And they have the energy. They improve their cognitive ability. So the reality is our epigenetic, our genetics, it's not as simple as, oh, that does that, and we're done if it is mutated or damaged. It's not the way genes work. So you can enhance and improve the expression of these genes. Even damaged genes, even genes that are mutated can be upregulated and improve in their function. So yes, you can absolutely detox. So Marcia, yeah, if you want more, you just cruciferous vegetables, working on liver function, liver health, looking at inflammatory factors, looking at immune activators, looking at neurological stressors. You know, it takes proper testing and then protocols, and you can absolutely detox very, very well with a mutated MTHFR gene. So, anybody else on Instagram? Are we good to go? I think I hit all the questions, so hopefully we did. I appreciate everybody being online. I always feel bad because likely somebody's typing in a question right now, and I'm going to say goodbye right as they're done. So give you a couple more seconds, but you said yes, you do?
Yeah, I'm just not sure how to pronounce it.
Let me see it.
Okay, I'll let you read it.
You grab me a glass of water if you would, please. All right. Amy on Instagram says, do you recommend chelation therapy to help with vaccine injury if it's been 10 plus years since his last shots? Do I recommend chelation therapy? It's kind of a loaded answer here. Yes and no. I would recommend detoxification way before improper detoxification, proper look at the immune system, proper improvement in immunoregulation way before chelation. What I see so many people do is they do one or the other, they do this one, then that one, and they do them separated, which sometimes you got to do that as a financial need. You have to take steps, but you need to understand the way in which you build the foundation. And a lot of times, I've never had to send anybody to IV chelation or even some of these DMSO, SOR, DMSA chelation. You know, I used to train with docs that did that type of stuff, so I know that there is potential benefit for those things, but I see the same results without those more extreme type chelation therapies. So that being said, I encourage do for the child or do for the individual what is necessary for that individual. You don't know what's necessary for that individual without proper testing, evaluation, consultation, discussion. So that's what I would recommend, and hopefully that answers the question. Now, if you've done everything else, like you've done and you've set up and you know that the immune system is within balance, your CD4, CD8 cell counts are within balance, or they're strong enough, you know that the microbiome is healthy, you already know that you're doing liver protocols necessary to improve liver function, heal liver damage, and improve bile flow. Hopefully the gallbladder's still there. That's a God forbid, you know, in people. Well, it's not a God forbid. It just stinks because then you have to supplement with something like ox bile. You supplement with bile to help in absorption of essential fatty acids, and that ultimately can improve cognitive improvements. Or improve the capability of cognitive improvement. So hopefully that answered that question as well. Chelation is the very last thing. Even things like zeolites and things like that, even the Wellness Way carries one. I hear all over the place. Even had somebody at church Sunday asking me about TRS. What's my opinion on TRS? My opinion on that type of stuff is it has its time and place. But I see a lot of people jumping to it way too soon, not setting up foundations, not even realizing that, hey, if I take a binder, but my liver and my excretion and my digestion is inflamed, I'm not going to detox with just a chelator in the system, and ultimately could actually lead to release of biotoxins, metals, and other things, and ultimately end up causing more tissue damage because it can increase the risk of immune activation, which is the primary biggest issue there. You have to calm the immune system down, in my opinion, way before you start to truly detox. So, and you have to set up the foundationals way before. So, all right, looks like I answered most all the questions on Facebook and Instagram. I'm going to jump off here. I love you all. I appreciate you all. I do appreciate anyone who does share the truth with others so that we can continue to save lives and change lives. People need help in this world right now. There's a lot of people suffering. We need to continue to fight the battles that are necessary to wake people up to the reality of where we are in healthcare and medicine and where our trajectory is going. At this current time, if we continue to see neurocognitive problems increase, we are not going to be able to sustain as an economy. We're not going to be able to, God forbid, with our presidents and the situations overseas and things like that. I think to myself, you know what, if the current rates, we're not going to have enough people to fight wars that sadly a lot of times these wars have some sort of economic reason or financial reason behind them. But the reality is we could be easily taken over and harmed as a nation if we continue to the trajectory within the next 20, 30 years, having 1 in 2 males on the autism spectrum disorders list. of diagnoses. So very, very real problems our nation is facing right now. So we have to stand up and continue to fight, not just for our own freedoms and rights. We need to fight for the rights and freedoms of every child and every mother and father who does not know the truth. We need to fight for our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, and even those people who would condemn us for speaking out and speaking the truth. We need to fight for their lives as well. That's the one thing I believe that we need to understand as the movement of natural health and the movement of people teaching people the truth about the devastating effects of drugs, of vaccines, and different things like that. We need to be the ones that will always say, I'm doing this for you. I'm speaking up for you. I will never wish upon you or your child harm. I see it all the time from the opposition and from the people who are pro-vaccine, that if we even simply hint that they may be doing something wrong to harm their child, or that the doctor wanting to give a medication or perform a procedure that is not necessary, we try and speak up and people condemn us for speaking up. It breaks my heart. Or they even wish upon us harm, or they wish upon our children harm. Never, never be the person. Always, always stand up for righteousness. Fight for those individuals, even though they may wish harm upon you. All right? I love you all. I thank you all. Share the truth. Don't just like it. It's the only way we save lives. I'm the Wild Doc.